Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Anne McLean from the library's music division. It's a great pleasure for us to have Lutenist Thomas Dunford here for a special solo recital. Thanks so much for talking today, and welcome.
Pleasure, it's nice to see you.
Your concert here a few years ago with Anne-Sophie von Otter and Jestin Davis was a memorable one. And since then, you've created a number of wonderful projects, including establishing the Jupiter Ensemble. With another marvelous singer, Léa Desandres, and I would like to talk about that. Your new album, Eternal Heaven of Handel, is just hitting this month, and I saw her comment that this is like a Baroque West Side Story. So I'd love to hear the story behind that. But to start, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about your instrument and how this particular evolution of the lute enables you to do so much that you do, and particularly about the harmonics.
Yeah. So this is an archlute. It comes from the oud, which is the North African instrument. I just grew up with parents that my father was from New York, cellist, and for some reason he started getting obsessed with a viola da gamba, with the Jordi Savall recordings on those old 33 tours, what do you call? And so he decided to go to Europe to study with Jordi Savall, who was his hero, before Jordi Savall did Tous les Matins du Monde, and I don't know if you see who this viol player is, but he wasn't known then, so it was really some kind of passion. And then he met my mother there. So my sister and I always heard Baroque music in the house, but it was a bit the dorky thing the parents used to do. And so I picked up the lute at a workshop they were giving in middle of France, 9 years old, and it was a bit like there were video games in the lute, you know. It was something I just liked to do, and I kept on doing it, and it became my life. It's an instrument that's really that I love, I still love. So as I told you, it comes from the oud, this Northern African instrument. It had 4 strings in the 11th century. You actually call them courses because you could double the strings. You could have 2 here and 2 here, 2 here. So there were 4 because they were playing with the plectrum. Back then it was more monodic, just one line. And in the medieval times they were still playing one line, but they started using the fingers. So it created this technique called the figuetta, where you play, which is pretty close to thumb, the same as plectrum. You use the thumb and the thumb and that. So you see on those old paintings they play like this, and then when it gets Baroque times they play more like this because they have more and more strings, because they like more and more polyphony. So you get to the Renaissance, you have a 6 string lutes, so like this, and all doubled. So you get 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, and this is called la chanterelle in French. So it means the singing one. So it's always on its own. And then in Baroque times, they started adding more and more strings. They had 8 courses, 10 courses, and then they had 14 course lute. Yeah. Oh, right. Wow. Very sophisticated. Actually, you can hear me right now. This is better. I wish. That'd be really easy. But so then you get to the Baroque times, and you have 14 strings. So it goes. This is an archlute. So it comes from the Renaissance lute with those G, D, A, F, C, G. And then it's a scale going down, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F. So that's what singers like, and also they like in the Baroque times, is you can give an impulse to the singer. But I think it's just a nice instrument. You can play, it has a lot of, so just, you'll get to hear it anyway, but can you hear how long the ringing goes? So on a guitar, you're going to get, I'm exaggerating, but I love the guitar, but you're not going to get the same sustain. So if you want to phrase something, you can easily. The sustain enables to be more vocal in a way, and that's what I love about the instrument, with the sympathetic strings as well. So you can play whatever you like on that instrument. It's an instrument that has the biggest repertoire of any instruments, even more than piano and guitar, 30,000 pieces at least, because from the 11th century to the 17th, there was so much written for it. But it was a little obscured. In the time of Bach, it was already kind of an old instrument, and then 200 years it kind of disappeared and then came back, is coming back, I hope.
You've said that the sympathetic strings on the lute create a halo effect. I was interested in that. You said that's an effect you like, and you're always looking for a sound that will permit the most emotion for the kind of music you're performing. What is the halo effect?
I'll show you the halo effect. I like, so it's with a sympathetic string. So you'll hear it before and after. So if I block those, right, and then I take it out. That's the halo. Just the harmonic strings working together to, like those Indian instruments that make this kind of natural amplification. And I think I love to work with Léa, as you were saying, and she, as a singer, says she's looking for as much harmonics in one note, because when you're having one note and the voice is not dispatched just in the vocal cords, but it takes over the whole body, you're getting all this overtones and harmonics that you can't really define, but you think, oh, that's a beautiful sound. I think that beautiful sound that Mozart was in love with, also with those high voices, is just overtones. That creates a lot of goodness in us, I think, in the chemical level.
And further about how the effects work and the structure and so forth of the instrument, you've talked about drawing the audience into silent moments when you can create kind of a suspension in time. I loved reading about this. And I know the audience feels this so powerfully when you perform it. I was just wondering if this is an arcane secret. How do you achieve this?
I got really, I call my group Jupiter because I love astronomy and physics and mythology, so it's like something I'm really interested in. And I think it's really interesting in music as well, the fact that rather than thinking I'm doing something that I'm creating, you come from the silence. There's nothing. And there's creation, just like nothing, Big Bang, something happens out of nothing. And I think there's a truth to that. Before a concert, I try to go deep down into a calm state so that the things that pop out. Otherwise, there's so much noise, so much stuff, that if you just think, oh, I'm another one of the noise, your brain saturates. Well, actually, if you're just listening to the silence, something happens. And there's also something that we're all listening to, the silence and the music, I think. I've noticed during confinement when I wasn't playing for audiences but more for cameras, I was playing the same suites by Bach, and then I played in Barcelona in this beautiful place, Palau, and it had been 3-4 months playing for an audience, and I was, wow, this is magic. People are actually playing the music too. It's like, I know those pieces so well, I've played them so many different ways, but the audience, you guys, when you're listening, it's like what quantum mechanics tell us. It's the fact of listening actually changes the music. So that's what's wonderful about live performance. It's like, there's not just you playing the music, there's also the input of a benevolent audience, or not.
We were talking just a moment ago about this mini-series of Bach solo recital, we were talking a moment ago about this mini-series of solo recitals this week and last month, which each figured a major work by Bach. And one of the reasons for having these recitals was to really highlight the gorgeous acoustics in our concert hall. And so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about this. I was saying that yesterday we had Benjamin Allard, the keyboard artist from France, just an incredible concert, the complete well-tempered clavier. But the day before he did a clavichord recital, and of course the clavichord is super quiet and subtle. And what he said to me was that about 10 minutes into the performance, he could feel the audience settling into the deep art of listening that they needed to be in to hear the performance in that hall, because it is so very quiet. But with that as a comment to open, I was thinking it'd be great to talk with you about how you made the transcription of the Bach Chaconne, which is such a magisterial work, and how did you go about making the transcription, and what are the challenges of that work for a lutenist?
Yeah, I remember clavichord concerts. My friend Jean Rondeau had a festival in Chambéry, and he would do yoga at 5 a.m. or some crazy hour, and then 6 a.m. everybody listens to the clavichord, which is so soft. In the beginning, your ear has to adapt so that you can, but then you hear it as a clear instrument, which is very nice. So I think that's cool, the clavichord. It must have been nice. But you were saying, yeah, the Chaconne by Bach, of course, I heard it played on the violin. My teacher, Hopkinson Smith, as well, did a really beautiful version. And I thought I had to do a series of recitals in Palau in Barcelona, full Bach for lute. Except Bach wrote 3 suites, and he wanted 6 recitals every year. So I had to adapt a lot of things. The cello suites, which are great, and the party, of course, that chaconne, which for me is one of the greatest pieces of music ever conceived, I think. So easy. You get Sibelius, the software. You get a MIDI file. You click, it's in, and then you have the violin part. Sometimes Sibelius does a little mistake, so you just readapt those little mistakes and add in a couple of chords and basses. Because if I only play the violin part, it's going to sound very monodic. So the lute will give a little more. Actually, that's why it's hard for the violin. So it's not natural for the violin to play all those chords. So the lute is already easier for that. But then for fast stuff, it's easier on the violin. So.
That's what I was hearing, is that even for violinists, they often say, oh, it's unplayable. And I wondered if it was any easier for you to achieve those effects and so on. This piece is part of a series, as I say, of ones that are all to focus on what the sound can be like for an audience in the Coolidge. And so I'll be curious to hear what you think afterwards when you play. If you hear the audience listening. I think you probably will, like Benjamin was saying.
It is one of the hardest pieces for any instrument. Yeah. But I think you talk to any musician playing Bach, and he's like the great master. It's like you're always trying to get better at doing it, but you're never quite satisfied. But when some little moments you get it right, it's so satisfying, and it's like running a marathon. You get you get better at running. So I think he's like he's the best training for a musician, and he will never be enough. He's just one of the greatest musical minds of all time.
There's a comment in the program today. You'll see the program annotations by Stacy Jocoy, which are very good, and she makes a comment that Brahms was describing this work to Clara Schumann as a piece that has the whole world of sound in it, everything. And I think that another thing that I was going to ask you about was, going back to your silence, you've said when silence becomes intense enough, that's the moment that everyone feels very connected. That's the moment you love in concerts, that you can. I noticed this in your concert here before with Anne-Sophie and Yeston Davis. In terms of the Bach composition, how do you think it might be different from other people in terms of the creativity that Bach himself employed in making this piece, in terms of just the chaconne being a standard form throughout the time and so on? Do you have any thoughts on that, his particular composition in creativity?
Well, everybody writes their own chaconne, whether it's Ray Charles or Monteverdi. They all do the tetrachord bass, you know. So when Bach does it, he doesn't do it often. The only instrumental piece I know of is that one. There might be more. I've discovered one as I was playing with an orchestra. We were playing another Passacaglia, which is amazing. But he doesn't do it too often. I don't know why. But when he wrote that one, it's right after he lost his wife. And there's something, just the beginning is like, there's something that's really despaired, that's really crying out to God or something, because he believed in God. So he's just crying out something. I think that's why it's such, I think it's Bach, but he's just crying. That's why it's such a relatable piece. Even now, he doesn't think I'm gonna do a chaconne. He can do anything. He's thinking anything, but he's putting all the emotions of the love he had for his wife in that moment and saying it's difficult to be mortal. It's difficult to be here. But in the middle part, he goes to that major bit where it's, no, I'm not going to spoil it. But in that major bit, it's all those moments that he had with the beauty of life. That's the way I see it. I think he wrote it after the death of his wife. And you get to that major part, it's terrible, I lost her. But remember those moments that were so beautiful. And I think I think he's just pouring his heart out. And it's just, he's such a genius, he doesn't even have to think about the harmonies. The guy who can write a St. John's Passion the way he does is, it's his vocabulary, his heart comes into music, and that's why, yeah, a real master.
Stacy also talked about the complexity of the contrapuntal writing in general in Bach, but in this tune, in her notes, she refers to this, and she says, artists and scholars talk about emotion or affect versus virtuosity and complexity. Both, of course, are so, you could plumb those depths forever. But she was curious, how do you bring out such expressivity while covering so many contrapuntal lines? How do you train yourself to think like this? I know it's part of being a lute player, just to be able to manage it, but how do you approach that?
Well, I think the danger with learning music in conservatories is it may continue to note-making machine. Like you can really, there's lots of people who come out and they play notes and they play piano and forte. But no musician nowadays creating their music is actually thinking, oh, I'm doing a piano or forte. They're just going with their feeling. If you listen to Rachmaninoff play his own stuff, it sounds just like he's pouring, again, some emotion. I think music is about emotion, so it has to have a meaning. A line has a meaning. And if you get familiarized with the vocabulary enough, then it has a meaning for you, which might be different than the one from Bach. But I think, yeah, any music, it's just, we have 300 years of separation with early music. So there's this great respect of those geniuses that were really great musicians that didn't have Netflix, so they would just compose. They would get to those really, I mean, there are great musicians here today, but we got so many distractions. There it was 12 hours a day. Music makes my world easier. So you got to create Monteverdis and Purcells and Bachs and Handels, all those guys who were amazing. But they were all about emotion, clearly. So I think you have to play with feeling. You have to play not with I'm performing. You were saying virtuosity, but virtuosity is also an effect, something fast, like the Four Seasons. It creates. I mean, he calls it summer, so it's like he's illustrating summer.
Thinking about these three masters that you've chosen for your program to highlight, Dowland, Bach, and Kapsberger, I wanted to ask you about Dowland in particular, and thinking about his, thinking about what you just said in terms of him being a master of the emotion tremendously, such that his music is still in the canon today, has been always, affects everybody in a powerful way, regardless of centuries and so on and so on. But I was also wanting to mention this thing, a quote from Thomas Mace, another master. He has a treatise, I think it's a treatise, Music's Monument, and talks about masters in the art and the occult and hidden secrets of the lute that are revealed to only a few. to practice and search into its secrets. And that when you said 12 hours a day, I was thinking pretty much that's what they were doing. But to talk about Dowland, whom you've described as really a Bible for you, I've always been curious to know more about what was the role of such an artist at the courts. I know he was a gentleman of the court, and he would perform for the king, both in Denmark and in England. But they didn't do concerts per se in quite the same way. But what can you tell us about his job? What was his job?
So most musicians back then had a job. They weren't like flying all over like what we're doing today. But Dowland wanted to have the best job that you could get because everybody knew him as the great lutenist and composer, and that was serving Queen Elizabeth, who was everybody was in love with Elizabeth at the time. She was a figure, and he didn't get that job because he converted to Catholicism in France, and England was Protestant, so that wasn't a good idea. And he wrote all those books of songs. And there's a lot of melancholy in his music. He, as a court musician, he ended up in Denmark, where he served Christian IV for about 5 years, I think. And that was a good job, except he writes this piece called "In Darkness Let Me Dwell," where he describes the walls of marble black that moist and still as deep as is his woe. It's really, you could see Dowland in this dark room with a marble, and actually if you go to Denmark Castle, you can see that room. It's actually a room where he used to play, and he would that's where "In Darkness Let Me Dwell" comes from, because there was this room where he used to play, and there was a pipe going up, and the King of Denmark and his court would have their own stereo system back then, except it was a pipe with Dowland downstairs, and you could actually close it. So this poor Dowland completely stuck in this miserable pit, and that explained part of his depression, I think. But I think that's also why we can relate. It's the same as we were talking about with Bach. There's this deep melancholy, and I like his phrase at the end of "Flow My Tears," which says, "Happy they that in hell feel not the world's despite." So we can all relate to those moments when we feel very alone, and I think that's one of the powers of Dowland.
So you don't see him as this is a fashionable pose at all. Some people say that was a pose of the artist, but I agree with you. I think that this was his nature, and that the power of his musical expression of those feelings is why he has retained his power for us today, centuries later.
I think he had to cope with a society where it was all about the kings and pleasing kings, but he was a kind of a rogue genius, and he was. You could see in his music, there's no compromise. It's just the way he feels, the way it goes, and he reinvents harmony. When he goes to the end of his life, it's almost like contemporary music. It's like he takes Renaissance music, like Monteverdi, same thing, same kind of genius. He takes standard Renaissance music, and then it changes over his life, just like the Beatles, right? At the beginning, you say, I saw her standing there, and then in the end, it's Revolution 9, you know. But I think it's the same with Dowland. He starts with something very, with this vocabulary, and as any genius, he makes it his own, and at the end of his life, I mean, this piece "In Darkness Let Me Dwell," if you look at the harmonies, it could be written today. So I don't think he really coped with the society he was. He tried to. He thought it was unfair that he had to be exiled and go through Europe. But I think that's also part of the motivation, being not understood. So that motivated him to write "Come Again, Sweet Love Doth Now Invite," trying to seduce the queen. And then he wrote those 4 books that are all his music we love today. Might not have been written had he been that comfortable.
I know you have a great interest in the Beatles, and I want to get back to that in a moment, because I understood you're about to release an album of things that relate to your love for the Beatles. But before moving away from Dowland, I was going to ask you to talk about, the "Flow My Tears," which people often know as a song nowadays, but don't know the original. But what made it so famous? How did it manage to transmute in so many ways instruments and so forth across the centuries now? What about that piece has made it so powerful?
It's kind of a perfect piece. I mean, if you just use basic harmonic feeling, starts like this in G minor. Flow my tears, fall from your springs. Very easy. And then the B part goes, never make my woes, B flat major. And then the last part goes, hark you shadows that in darkness dwell. And then at the end, feel not the world's despite. So you have this kind of perfect structure, just like Orfeo, Monteverdi's Orfeo, where it's like really, if you look at it, it's like the golden number all over the place. That's why mathematicians love Bach and really good pieces that still work. There's this kind of really nice mathematical geometry. And I think that Lacrimae piece was very successful because it has a really good geometry. It's heartfelt, and it's one of the hits of the time.
This is a pavane, right?
Yeah.
This slow two-part duple meter piece that people often would make an entrance to, or a walk into the presence of the king, as I understand it. I was wondering if this relates to the air de cour concept as well, when you wanted to show off your comportment, your mastery of comportment, your elegant manner, your clothing, and so forth. But maybe talk about pavane and galliard, the two major forms that we're talking about with this Dowland set.
It's a bit like the Bach suites. The Bach suites is based on prelude, allemande, which is also a dance, sarabande, which is also a dance, jig. But when he does it, it's not about the dance anymore. I mean, there's still the dance character to it, but it's more of a exercised form that's there. I think that when Dowland writes a pavane, or all those composers, it's more of the form of it that comes from the dance, which is a noble dance that starts from the Renaissance times, where there were princess and prince next to each other walking, one, two, you know, in those things. But I don't think when the musicians were playing pavanes, it was necessarily always about that. I think in the case of Lacrimae, it's the style, just the style of the piece. And same with the Galliard. Galliard is a fast dance that was very difficult to dance, very virtuosic. I saw some people dance to Galliard today, so it's like they're flying around all over the place. But yeah, again, it's the King of Denmark's Galliard is just a glorious piece in homage to his king. Yeah.
Incredibly athletic, those dances, the Galliards can be incredibly so. I know that you need to be warming up soon and so on, so we don't want to keep you too long, but I wanted to ask you to talk about the great, gorgeous, brilliant group, the Jupiter Ensemble, that you've just founded a few years ago. And if you haven't heard any of these recordings, they are just stunning. And you talk about the painting, and it's true, the color painting is so magical, like the Farnese piece that opens the Vivaldi program. I was interested, you said you wanted to become the artistic director, to found the group and so forth, to take further your ideas about sound and color and what the music should be like and so on. I was wondering, in terms of your new album, Eternal Heaven, which has just come out, how did you build the story for this? This is Handel. And tell us how you put it together with Leah and Jestin.
So it started with, I did a recital with Jestin Davis, who's a good friend that we came here to. And I just remember an encore where Jestin's voice and Leah on Pur Timero Monteverdi. So I thought, wow, that's two golden voices. You put gold and gold together and you get, I don't know. It was really beautiful, and I thought, okay, if we're recording something, let's highlight those beautiful voices together. Who's better to highlight two beautiful voices together? Handel. So what we did during confinement when we were home by the fireplace is we went through all of the English repertoire of Handel. We wanted to create something that tells a story. That's why the West Side Story idea, like they fall in love in the beginning, spiritual program, so it starts with eternal source of light divine. And then the second piece is in darkness, as is my woe, that's Léa sings, so Léa is in this deep, miserable state. But then Yestin comes in, and he's this happy preacher saying, the bliss I view, and he falls in love with Léa, and then they have this fight. But we went through all of the English repertoire of Handel, and had a selection of 5 hours of masterpieces, and we had to compress everything to 1 hour 25, but it was really hard, you know. So we ended up, usually a good recording is not just vocal stuff, it's like instrumental, vocal, instrumental, vocal. We had so much good stuff, we had to put it into that, and we just decided to do entr'acte, like, how do you say entr'acte? Like in the middle of like in the cinema when you get or like here, we're gonna get a break. And the break is the Sarabande that you know from Barry Lyndon, probably. That's a good hit. So, yeah, it was a very intense program, and
joy comes across so much, and that's what your performances and your ensemble are known for, is this sense of joy, performance among friends, and so on. And also humor and so on. I got a kick out of the ghost tracks. You're going along listening to the CD and you think it's over, and then a few minutes later a totally different sound world comes on. How did you think of doing those? The We Are the Ocean is the one that I have at home from the Vivaldi. Talk about that.
So it's like when I created this group, I was playing with a lot of different groups, and I learned a lot from William Christie or John Lloyd Gardner or really wonderful teachers and masters of music. And they all have their thing. But I thought what's really good about this music, even in the time of Mozart, is there was no conductor. There were just musicians playing together. If you look at paintings, you go to Salzburg Museum where Mozart was, he was playing the pianoforte with musicians around him. And he even describes rehearsals where he's not waving, he's playing, but he's listening to what's going on. And it's a real chamber music feeling. So it's also a different way to do music. So that's what I wanted to do with Jupiter, is go back to the way, the ethics that they had, which was more, I mean, in the middle of jazz and classical world today, I think. Goes a little closer to jazz in a way because they're all improvising. They all know the style, and they're all listening and reacting to each other. So I think that's the kind of sound we can get with Jupiter, because we work together. I try to understand what the composer wanted to say, where it's going. Like if you get a soccer team, you need to all go to the goal with a strategy. So that's my role. What's the harmonics? Eternal source of light, divine goes all the way there. Let's go to that goal. But then Bruno Philippe, who's a wonderful cellist, will have some really good insights on how to use the bow. And we're all going to work together to make the music as emotionally moving as possible. I lost the question.
No, that was the question. I mean, that's perfect.
But
yeah, we were just talking about the ghost tracks, but the emotion is so interesting. And you've said that music is all about emotions. It's a gesture too, and I love that. I love the concept of gesture. And that's something that I feel so strongly, phrasing, gesture, but it is a unified thing that comes across so much with your ensemble.
Well, that's what I wanted to do. I saw all these brilliant musicians that were working for one vision that was being shown. And I think one vision that's shown is wonderful. When I play with Gardner, I can't believe how he's shaping the harmony so nicely and doing these wonderful things. But what I wanted is to highlight every musician, that everybody feels responsible for the music together in a collective consciousness. So I basically brought all my favorite people and musicians together. So there's a lot of friendship going on, and that creates the ghost tracks. Because one of my best friends is a bass player, common love with classical music and all sorts of music, including the Beatles, of course, we grew up with. So we always end up jamming in bars at the end of concerts and writing new songs. So that's been something I always did for fun at the end of recording. Leave the thing on. You might get a little funny surprise in the end, little ghost track. So the first one we wrote with Doug was We Are the Ocean, about exactly that. The fact is, we're all a little drop in the ocean, and I just like to leave a little philosophy there at the end. But for me, it's all about doing things together, about finding together. Even great conductors, it's the same. They manage to get everyone together. When I talk with Gardner about this, he says, I say, how are you so powerful with your gestures? How do you make the music sound so good? And he says, well, I know that it's you doing it. And he makes it so that everybody feels responsible and everybody gives their best. And yeah, that's the way I think music works and life works. We work together in a common goal. And that's what I love about concerts when they work well. At the end, there's this community of people that feel closer together and in a maybe better state than when we go back to airports and angry people.
You're talking with John Elliott Gardner about conducting. You're going to expand that into that world as well, maybe?
I'd love to, but
you have a lot to do.
I would love to, yeah. We talk a lot about music, and he shows me things, but it's a real technique. You have to learn how to do that. I think for later, conducting really happened when you had to have huge, massive people. You can't. It's really hard to just work with the ear when you get symphonic orchestras. So that's really useful to be able to do that. But for now, I'm just going with the flow and doing what I love.
I know you play jazz a lot, and you love all kinds of music. And I am curious: is it true that you might be doing an album that is going to be recorded at the Abbey Road Studios? And if so, what is that album?
Yeah, it's so my old label Alpha contacted me during confinement and said Apple Music is doing home sessions series for pop artists who are not doing stadiums anymore. So they have their home studios and they're doing this, but they liked your pop encores, so they want you would be the exception as a classical musician to do this. So I thought, oh great, let's do why not? Let's do those pop things. So we did the home sessions with my friend Doug Balliet of our songs, and Yeston's friend Sam Okel, who remixed the Beatles, like he's a Grammy Award winning mixer, and Yeston went to school with him. So I wrote to him an email, said it would be a dream, since you work with my heroes, to I'm doing this album, and would you like to mix? And then I had this phone call, and it was like Christmas. I was so happy. I was like, I'm going to work with in Abbey Road Studios. I can't believe it. It's going to be fun.
What a great project. Any other one that you want to share? And then maybe we'll have one question or two questions. Anything? What would be your ideal opera project? I'm curious about that, if you were to put on an opera or produce.
I first did Orfeo in Tête des Champs-Élysées. That's a great one. Monteverdi's Orfeo. But the first one we want to do with Jupiter is Venus Adonis by John Blow, first half, and Dido in the second half. I think Blow was Purcell's teacher, and they're both amazing operas. So we'd like to do that in the future. But we're going to do lots of other projects with Jupiter, whether it's Bach, Purcell, Dowland. And next year we're going to do first stage program with Léa Desandré around Julie Andrews. So that's why I have to learn how to do this, because we're going to be an orchestra. And the idea is like an homage to Julie Andrews, because she was always Léa's hero, Julie Andrews. And I also grew up with musicals, so we thought, let's do an homage to her, recreating those scenes that we all know, The Sound of Music, Mary Poppins and all that. And maybe Julie Andrews' voice off, saying, "Oh, I remember when I was a child," and this, and then creating the scene. So that's gonna be fun.
Wow, I'm excited about that one. So, are there just one or two questions, and then maybe we'll let you get back to re-rehearsing?
We have a mic here. Anybody?
Yeah, Mike's bringing one. Yeah.
Oh.
This morning I was reading the Wikipedia article on the lute, and one of the things they said is that when they were first used and developed, they are incredibly hard to tune. And I'm interested in the tuning, the physical part of the tuning here. It looks like there are little metal cogs and wheels in there, as opposed to just the old wood inside a wood hole. Is the tuning on this different from the old traditional style?
Yeah, so it's the difference is it's actually the same. It's all wood.
Okay.
So it depends on the instrument. This one moves a little because it's not perfectly, as you see, perfectly settled. But what the main difference is the gut strings. At the time, they had a really good. It was an art to make gut strings. So you would make a present to your queen, and you'd go and get your bass gut strings in Spain and your top gut strings in Italy because they had this art of making the gut strings, which we don't have today. So gut strings today are okay, but they often sound a little like, you know. So anyway, the way I'm traveling, a musician is traveling today, if you go gut strings, it will be an awful concert for you. I'll just spend a lot of time tuning. So I go for Nile gut and then carbon strings, and then nylon, wound and metal, which is a different sound. Gut can be nice, but I don't think we master the art the way they did. And so tuning should be a little less tonight, I hope. Yeah.
Can you say something about Kapsberger?
Yeah.
One really sees him on the program.
Yeah, Kapsberger was a German, born in Germany, but very Italian. And he did all his career I think in Rome. And he wrote many operas that we lost. But we also still have his books of lutes. And he's kind of a Paco de Lucia from the time. You know, the flamenco player? Very virtuosic, crazy harmonies, and very experimental, and also a genius, I think. Girolamo Kapsberger. His first name was Hieronymus, Johannes Hieronymus Kapsberger. Then when he went to Italy and became so Italian. Yeah.
So, is your instrument, is that what's known as a theorbo lute, or you know, the extra long neck that gives you the extra strings, the ones I'm used to seeing in some of the paintings and whatnot, are lacking the length. And could you just say something about that?
So this is an archlute. So it comes from, as I was saying, the Renaissance lute, which is that tuning. Those 6 strings, which is the minimal for Renaissance. It goes all the way to 10 strings. And then when you add in the basses, that's why they created this extra extension to go down. And then it's called archlute. But what happened is that the bigger the instrument gets, the more the small strings break. So like those 2 top strings here, if I get too big, it's going to keep on breaking all the time. So they invented this system where they, instead of having, they would have, meaning the 2 top strings are an octave down. So the strings wouldn't break, and that's called a theorbo. It's basically the same as an archlute, it's just a little bigger, and then that tuning that in France you call accord avalé, like swallowed tuning, because it goes back down. Reentrant. I didn't know that. Reentrant tuning. So it's good because when you're playing with singers, if you play on the archlute, you're going to get flow my tears. But if you play the theorbo, you're going to get right? Flow my tears. You're always going to stay under and never bother anyone up there. Which archlute players can be really annoying sometimes.
Wonderful. Maybe that might be a good moment to stop and give you a chance to warm up and so forth. But thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.